All right, could you tell us your name, please?
I'm Leo Lawhun,
And what year were you born?
1933.
And where are you from originally?
Originally from Carter County, Kentucky.
And when did you move up here into DeSoto County?
I'm too young to remember. A couple years old.
Okay, so were you living here when at the time of like the 1937 flood?
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. Well, I remember a few little things about it. Yeah.
Well, would you tell us about that?
I was just barely past 3 years old whenever the flood happened. Yeah. What I remember about it mostly was there's a lot of water, and we lived in New Boston, at the bottom of Fifth Avenue, and the water kept coming up, and we kept going up to the neighbors' houses. And the thing that I really remember most is one of my first remembrances. One of the first things I can remember was I had a younger brother. He was sick, and my mother took him to the hospital, took him to the doctor, and they had to come in and get her in a boat and take her over. And he made 2 or 3 trips to the doctor, and one day she come back and he had died in the doctor's office. And that's the big thing that I really remember about that flood.
And so you grew up in Scioto County, but I know that you have you traveled around a little bit.
Yes, we moved from where we lived there in New Boston. We moved to Greenbrier Ridge, Greenbrier Road up on top of the hill, and that's where I started school. I went to Medford. I went to the 3rd grade. I got to the 3rd grade in Medford, and then we moved north to Paulding County. It was right after the war started, and we went up there. Dad was going to work on the farms, and he did for a summer. And then the next summer they brought in truckloads of Mexicans, and they worked on the sugar beets. And he got a job over in Fort Wayne in a ordnance plant, and he was working there. That's the first good job he'd ever had since the Depression started. And Mom got tired of living there, and we moved back to, she and us kids moved back to New Boston. And we got down here, it was in summer of '44. And she found out that Wheeling Steel was hiring, and she wrote down a letter, and he come back too. And he went to work at the mill, and he worked there the rest of the time that he worked.
How did he come home when he came home from work? I remember when I was young and my dad worked at Buckeye Steel, he'd come home filthy. Do you have any particular memories of when he would come home from work, what he would look like?
Yeah. Well, actually they had a shower over there most of the time. But yeah, they come out there, they could come out there pretty, and they could make it pretty dirty on your house too. They blow that soot out every night, and it'd be about ½ inch deep on your on your porch every morning.
Let's see, and where did you go to high school?
Glenwood.
See, I know that after high school you went into the service at some point. Would you tell us a little bit about how you got there and how you decided on your branch, and just tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I used to watch those war movies. I saw those Navy ships, and I said, I want to be on one of them. And I really wanted to do that for a long time. And I was on my 17th birthday. It was in December of '50. And I dropped out of high school, and I said, I'm going to join the Navy. And naturally, being 17, I had to have a parents' consent, and Mom said no. And Dad said, well, why don't you try to get a job first? So I fooled around a couple of weeks until I couldn't find a job. And a month after my 17th birthday, I was sworn into the Navy.
And what was your job in the Navy? What did you do?
I was a radarman.
I'm not familiar. Could you tell us a little bit about what you would do?
Well, actually, the radar, I didn't work on radars. I was not a technician. I operated them. And we had a little space that we worked in called Combat Information Center. We gathered information from radar and radios, and we gathered information and then we sent it out to the people that needed to know about it. And a lot of ships, most of the ships I was on, I was the only radar, but we didn't have we didn't have a CIC anyway. And I just did everything. I operated the radar and answered the radios and signaled on the signal lights. Mostly we did mostly the radar was navigation, getting from one place to another. I was on minesweeper, so we had to go through we had to keep track of where we swept the mines to keep so people know where it was clear.
That makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
Where did you spend? I know being in the Navy is a very mobile occupation. Where did you spend a lot of time while you were in the service?
In the Far East.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time I was in the Far East and moving around. The place that we stayed most, the ships I were home ported on, were home ported in Japan. So we was in Japan and we moved out around in the Philippines and Okinawa and Taiwan.
And excuse my military not having a great knowledge of that. What were the sorts of things that you were trying to accomplish at that point while you're stationed on the boat and out there? It was in 50. Was there a conflict going on right then, or?
The conflict?
Mm-hmm.
No, the conflict ended in 53. I remember we was going out on the way out to our area there to do some minesweeping, and they signed a truce it was in July of 53. We turned around and went someplace else.
Well, would you mind telling me a little bit about the time you spent when you're docked in Japan and living there? And
Well, yes. That's where I met a very lovely little girl. And she finally consented to marry me. I was in 55. And naturally, in 55, you had to get a whole bunch of paperwork figured out. And it took a long time to do it. But then, that was in January of 55, but in July they transferred me and I come back to the States, and I was in Long Beach about a year, I guess. We got back over, it was within a year the ship deployed back over there, and we was going to stay there 6 months and going to come back, and we did. And I didn't have a chance to get any marriage approved. So finally, we went back over there. I was on another minesweeper, and we went back over there. It was in 50. It was in about January or February of 57. And since how we wasn't going to be able to get all that paperwork done, we had a Japanese wedding, and. We got married. It was on the 25th of May of 1957. I got married, and later on, it was in 1959 that we got all the paperwork done, and we took our son and we went up to the American consulate and put all them papers on the table. He says, "Raise your right hand," and I did. And he said, "Do you swear all this information is true?" I said, "Yeah." He says, "Okay," and he gave us a certificate. We was married again.
How long did you live? You mentioned that you had a child there, and how long did you guys live out there?
Louis was, let's see, he was about 3.5 years old when we left there. About 3.5. So.
Since most of us don't get to know much about Japanese weddings, would you care to just talk about how it worked? I was lucky enough to have gotten to see a picture before, but
did you see that tape we got of Tippay's wedding?
Mm-mm.
You have to see it, because they had a real traditional Japanese wedding, and they had a Western wedding. He had 2 weddings there the same day. But it's a big party, really. It's a real party. You drink a little sake and sing songs, and I always drink a little sake. could sing songs. I guess everybody else did too. I don't know. But yeah, you dress in a kimono, you wear a kimono. I look great in kimonos. I was great looking. But Sweetie, she's the one who's pretty. But what you do is you exchange sake, three cups of sake, and that concludes the ceremony. That seals the ceremony. You're married then.
So, since you were an English speaker, did they give you a translator, or did you just have to hang on and listen in Japanese and figure it out, or do you speak?
No, I didn't have a translator, but I knew what was going on. I don't speak Japanese, but I understand. I understand a whole lot of it. I tell you, last time we went to Japan. No, it wasn't the last time. Yeah, it was the last time. It was after her father had died, and they have a lot of ceremonies after the death and after the burial. And there was a Buddhist priest came up to her mother's house, and he was conducting something, and he sat there and talked, and I listened to him. I caught a word every now and then, and suddenly he turned around and he says, "I understand you really like Japan." In perfect English. I said, "Yes, sir, I sure do." And we had a little conversation, and he said he was getting ready to go to a convention at the United Nations, and he said it was a religious convention, religious from all over the world, that they always start out with a prayer and end with a prayer. But he was really something. He gave me his card. I've still got his card in case I ever want to get in touch with him.
While you were living there, to be an American living in Japan, was that, did you have trouble getting along with people, or is there any like...
No. There's no, I'll tell you what, the Japanese people are really, you can't, unless you know them, they just look like stone, they're cold. But I walked down the street there in the morning real early when we was visiting there, and there was a little lady would come along, and they would look like that, and you go, "Good morning," and boy, their face would light up. Yeah, but they're kind of standoffish. They don't push their way in. But if you'll show them that you're friendly, they're friendly. I said they were having an election. I went down. There's a whole row at a red light. There's a whole row of them. Politicians holding up their signs, and I wanted to go between them and where the people would stop for the red light. So I stopped and waited, and when the car started driving again, but then I walked on through, and they all bowed to me. They thought that was great. Yeah, Japan are friendly people. I could live in Japan.
What was the city that you were living in?
We lived in Sasebo. That's about 40 miles north of Nagasaki, where Teiko was born.
I do have some questions. I was hoping, as you know, to get her here and let her talk about things, because I only know a bit of her history there, but hopefully you can kind of fill in a little bit for us, or maybe schedule her some other time. But real quick before we leave the military part of it, and I don't want to drag you into anything that you don't want to talk about, but I know that there was a situation that you were on a boat that ended up sinking, and was that true, or was I missing?
No, I never was on anything that sunk.
Oh, okay. See, this is one of the reasons I was so excited about this, is I keep hearing these bits and pieces of stories, and I don't know what's what.
As soon as I got out of boot camp, we went over there, and did you ever see that picture of that ship hanging up in the shop? Well, that was my first ship. That was my first duty station. And the first trip out, we was out there, we were sweeping mines, and we swept mines, and at night we would go way north, almost to the Russian border, and we would shoot up railroad tracks and bridges and stuff. And in the day's time, we come back down with sweet mines. And on the very first trip out, we was up there around a little island called Songjin. Songjin is where it was at, and there's a little island there, Yangdo was. And we was working around there, and suddenly, I was on the lookout. I was on the lookout, and I saw some water splashed around out there, so I reported it. And boy, this splash, it just walked right in. And the ship, they hit that ship about, well, 17 times it was hit. And three people were killed, and there was a few injured. But it would have been worse, except that their ammunition was all, the only thing hit was armor piercing. It was just going right through the ship and out the other side. But if they hit somebody, they pretty well. And we lost power. The ship was landed dead in the water. And my battle station was back on the 5S gun, but I was on the lookout. I couldn't go because nobody had come to relieve me, so I stayed up there on the lookout. I never did get to fire that gun that day. I didn't fire it anyway. That wasn't my job in there. I was too small to load it, and I wasn't senior enough to get to point it or train it. So I got to catch the hot powder cases when they ejected. That was that was a good job.
That sounds awful.
And I'll tell you what's really weird is exactly 1 year later, we went back to that same place, and at just about the same time of the year, and we took one round at the bridge, and it killed a whole bunch. It was one round, it all that hit us, and it killed a bunch of people. But in that first time, I was a deck above the bridge, and I was looking down, and I saw our executive officer down there. He was shot. He looked like he'd lost a whole leg. But then there was not that many. And then the next time around, I was a radarman, and I was a deck below, and there's a whole lot of shrapnel from showered down through. It didn't hurt anybody down there, but it killed a lot of people on the bridge. I don't remember how many. I remember I had a friend he got wounded. He had something wrong. He got hit on the foot. And I remember he was laying out there on his stretcher waiting for a ship to come alongside and take off. So I was talking to him. He said, "I want you to look at that." I said, "Yeah, I see it." He says, I worked 3 hours shining them shoes and getting them shot. Yeah. Good sense of humor. But that is really sad,
So we'll kind of jump back to Japan now. So you got to live there for a while, and if you don't care, would you mind if I ask some questions that Teiko would probably be better able to answer, but I'd still really like to
You
know.
ask them, and I'll answer them if I can. She said I can do it better than her anyway. I don't believe her.
So she was living in Nagasaki throughout she was born there, grew up there. Is that correct? And
until September of 1945.
Could you tell that whole?
Well, her whole family is from Nagasaki, and she was going to school. She was, I guess she was 9 years old, about 45. Yeah, because she'd been 10, 47. Anyway, she's going to school, and in September, or it was in August. Yeah, it was in August. I dropped that bomb on her. She had her mother, and she had one brother at the time, I think. Yeah, one brother at the time. They sounded a bomb raid warning, and they went to a cave.
So they were able to get out of the city and.
Well, yeah, they went up there to the cave, and they went in the cave. Nagasaki had never been bombed. They wanted to drop those atomic bombs on the cities that had never been touched, and that's what they did. But they got up there, and for something she had to go back her mother was going to go back, and she said she knew her mother had a sore foot and couldn't work, so she went back. She went back and did whatever she had to do at home. I don't remember exactly what it was. And as she's going back in the cave, the concussion from that bomb pushed her, threw her right back in the cave. So it didn't hurt her any, but they stayed in the cave there. And some soldier come up and told them, said, don't come out of the cave, just stay in there, you're better off in there. And they stayed in there, and everybody else was leaving, and her mother said, well, if we're going to die, we'll just stay here and die together. So they stayed there. But she said when they come out of the cave, they had to walk across the dead bodies. And they went down to their house. They were going to try to recover some clothing and stuff. And they told them, even about the house was gone. It was nice, it was gone. And probably the best, because everything there was contaminated. And if it had carried over a bunch of stuff, it ended up with radiation sicknesses and probably death. But they walked out of there, and I don't know exactly how they made it, but they moved up to Sassenberg because her mother had a sister up there, and they went up there. And I guess her mother got a job. They didn't know where her father was. He'd been in Burma. He was still somewhere up there. He didn't get home till, I think he said, about a year after the war finished, near a year.
How long did they have to stay when they were in the cave? How long did they have to stay there?
I don't know how long they stayed, but they stayed till they figured it was okay to come out, and it was. She'll talk about it. She'll tell you. If you stay there and you ask her, she'll tell you. And she was waiting for the Americans to invade, and she was going to. And they taught this to the kids in high school. Just kill one person. If you kill one American, that's good. So she was ready to kill her American. I could see her out there with her little stick. I don't know how she planned to do it. She did. But that was the end of her education. She had no education, no formal education. She got she went to school up there, but she had to take care of her brothers, and then the little sisters come on, and she had to take them to school. And when one of the babies cried, she had to leave her class. So she didn't get any educated, but she's the smartest person I ever saw, and she has more common sense in that finger than any of us has got in our whole body. And she don't know she's smart. She don't think she's intelligent at all, but she is. Way ahead of me.
If you don't care, I know that you lived in Japan for about a few years, and Louis, your son, was about 3.5, and you moved back. Mm-hmm. Why did you guys decide to come back?
Because I got transferred.
Well, okay, that'll do it. That'll take care of it.
Yeah. I stayed over there forever. I was at Minesweeper. I think I was on the Minesweeper, and I was the only one on there. And I've been that way ever since I started. I never did work with other radarmen. And they sent me orders to aircraft carrier. And it was over there. And I wanted to bring her and Louis over here. So I took my leave and I brought them over here, and then I went back and I dropped her off at Mom's house. And I went back to the aircraft carrier. And that is the scariest day of my life. I went on that thing. Our CIC was seven decks up from flight deck.
Excuse me, what's a CIC?
CIC?
Uh-huh.
Combat Information Center. And I finally got there. I learned how to count the doors that I go through, and then I know where to start up, and I counted there, so I got up there. And I learned that, and I got up there, and coming from a ship where I was the only radar around, they said, well, here's your radar. I said, how many of them are there? We got 125 right now. I said, gee, I don't know what I'll do with them. Every one of them knew more about aircraft carrier radar than I did. So I finally got started getting back and forth up there, and I knew what I was doing. And just getting used to it. And then I got orders to get, it was in 62. Yeah, it was in 62. It was in the fall, or when President Kennedy was having all the trouble with Cuba. And we were sitting around out there waiting to go go to Cuba. But we didn't have to go to Cuba, but we deployed to Japan. And just when we got to Japan, I got my orders to get transferred back. And I come back to Lexington, Kentucky. I spent a couple of years down there.
So all during this time was Takeo still living here in?
No.
She moved to.
When I came back, when the Yorktown come back, I came back and took them to Long Beach. They lived in Long Beach. That's where the whole port of the Yorktown was. And then when I brought them back from Kentucky, she liked Kentucky. Yeah, she liked Kentucky really. She grew good neighbors down there.
Did so you guys come back and then suddenly you're living in America. How did Louis, your son, how did he react to it? Was
just like any kid. Whatever happened. He just got started in the first grade, and right in the middle of his first grade, we transferred. we went back to. Well, I was going to go to school at Treasure Island. They were going to teach me some electronics there at Treasure Island, and I went up there, and I accidentally drove into San Francisco, and I drove out there just as quickly as I could, and I drove over to Berkeley, where all the hippies was. And I stayed over there. We didn't go back to San Francisco. But Treasure Island is right out in the middle of the bay. The bridge, it's in the bridge goes past it, you drive off the bridge into the island, and then you go on, if you go on across, you're in San Francisco. That's a man-made island, by the way, Treasure Island. The Navy doesn't have it anymore, they gave it to somebody else. But I went to 9 months of electronics school there. And then after that, I went to six weeks of operational school in San Diego. So we moved out there to San Diego, and that's the last place we stopped, was San Diego. Got down there and stayed there. It was about 5 years. About 5 years, I think it was. Yeah, 65. Yeah, 65 to 70. No, 66 to 70. About 4.5 years. Then I just got out. We deployed to Vietnam 3 times, and it was getting ready to deploy again. And I said, I don't want to go. I want to stay. I want to stay with my. He was 12 years old. And he didn't even hardly know me. I'm going to bring him home and stay with him a while.
So when were you able to move back here? Did you retire from, or I don't know exactly what the terminology is, how did you stop being in the Navy and come back here?
Well, you just request transfer to the Fleet Reserve. For all practical purposes, you're a civilian, but you will be in reserve for 10 years, and after 10 years, they send you retirement papers. Well, no, that's if you get out of 20. If you spend 30 years, then you don't have to go to Fleet Reserve. You just go right on to retire. And if I'd have been by myself, I probably would have stayed in. I was happy with it.
Was it unusual when you moved back here? I mean, this is a small area to have a Japanese wife and a child that had grown up there for a while? Did they have trouble getting into the culture here?
No.
Nope. Nothing the least bit unusual.
I tell you that when we first got here, and I was bringing her back to stay at Mom's house, we flew into Cincinnati, and it was in the middle of the night. We caught a Greyhound bus going to come to Portsmouth, and it come up 125. And she says, "Where's the houses? Where's the house?" She kept looking for houses, and there was no houses there. She said, "Boy, we're getting deep into the country." She was afraid there wasn't going to be any people. But I can understand it.
See if I want to make sure I get everything here. Well, I've got you captured. In the time that you've been familiar with this area for a while, what do you think is the biggest change?
Here?
Yeah.
People's gone. When I was in high school, this was a very, very thriving community. We had the steel mill, we had 2 or 3 shoe factories downtown people worked at, and well, there's just a big job. And at that time, Portsmouth had 70 taxi cabs on the street. Yeah, 70. 70 taxis on the street, and they had bus routes from Portsmouth to Sutterville and all around. Put your dime in there and you could go. And it was really something. And in New Boston there we had 2 movie theaters, had furniture stores there in town, and clothing stores. And it really was an affluent place here. I liked it, but I was ready to leave.
I do have sort of a personal question for you that I've always wondered about. You have on your tattoo, is it a...
That's a snake and a skull.
I thought it was a fish.
See there?
Oh, okay. I always thought it was a fish. Okay. Where'd you get that?
Where'd I get it?
Yeah, why?
Everybody else was getting one, so I got one too. There's 3 or 4 of us. We went over into San Francisco and looking around. Everybody was getting a panther. I don't want a panther. I want a snake. Yeah, it was 3 of us from New Boston. We ended up on the same ship. Ended up on the same ship. We had 2 dogs. They're both dead now. Gone.
When you were first married and had your house in Japan and then moved over here, did you have 2 languages? Did you speak English all the time, or how did you?
I spoke English. Fortunately, Tangos can understand English.
When Louis was growing up, could he do both?
No.
No.
No. I remember the first word he said. I come home. I've been out to sea for a while. Well, when he was born, he was born on the 6th day of July, and Teiko had a terrible time. She almost died, and she finally got out of the hospital. And the day she got out of the hospital, my ship was going out for 2 weeks to fool around outside. I told her, I'll be back in 2 weeks. Well, it was after Christmas before we got. Every time the Chinese would shoot at their little islands down there, we'd have to run down. So we was down there fooling around. And she thought I wasn't coming back at all. Yeah, she thought I left for good. But but as I was saying, Louis had not learned to talk or walk. And I come back in one time, and he come running through the house. The guy said, "Ami-chan, Ami-chan." He said, "There's an American here." He didn't understand a word of English. But he learned the Japanese. And when we come over here, Takeo said he will learn the English better if she don't take it. I really believe he would have been better off if he'd learned the English anyway. But he didn't learn the Japanese. He didn't learn the Japanese. So when her father came over to visit, Louis stayed with him, took him fishing, took him every place, but he couldn't talk to him. They couldn't communicate.
It's really interesting that you. Who are you? That's a sweet story that makes me smile. Well, let me go through real quick. I just want to make sure I don't cut you short or leave out anything. I know, did you celebrate having two different cultures in the same house? What holidays did you celebrate?
We celebrated everything.
Oh, yeah?
I tell you, yeah, Christmas comes, we have a big Christmas party. New Year's come, we have a big Japanese New Year's party. And they had all kinds of parties in between. We had a lot of parties. We used to have a party every once in a while. She had a big long table board she'd put up, and she'd hire people to wait on the tables. Oh, we had some good times. Her mother and father. She had one uncle. I really liked him. He was kind of funny, and he was bald headed. But I really liked him. He was a good old man.
So, once you moved here, did you continue that sort of doing all of the different holidays? And I guess what I'm really asking is, how did having two cultures here?
No,
what did that look like?
No. The only thing is, Japanese don't work on New Year's Day, and Takeo wouldn't work on New Year's Day. And finally, when she was working down there at the hospital, she had to work on one New Year's Day. Boy, it really broke her heart. But it had to happen. No, she didn't have any trouble with it. She didn't have any trouble here. She adapted to it better than I did when we got back.
It doesn't surprise me. She seems able to handle anything. She
can meet a person that she's never seen in her life and sit there and talk to them all afternoon. I can't do that. I can't do that. Louis was that way. He'd go fishing, he'd say, "Boy, I met a new friend today." He had a lot of fishing buddies. But he could talk to anybody about anything, anytime. And I never was that way. I was always kind of shy and introverted. But I also had a very vicious temper. I was really a mixed up kid there. I had all those tendencies there. But I was very introverted. Still am. But I'm trying to get out of it.
This is a big step. I'm proud of you for sitting in front of my camera here. Let's see. Is there anything that I know you said you're not really a talker, but is there anything that you think I should have asked, or you want to make sure you get to talk about?
No, I don't know anything.
I'll get through one more time, just to make sure that I don't leave anything out. I think we've got it all. Are you sure? I mean, I don't want to cut you short. I don't want to, not let you talk about something that you think.
No, I don't have anything to say.
All right. Well, thank you much. I'm just going to turn this off here.